Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker. Romans 14:23 says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." If you're a biker and a Christian, have you considered that riding can be an activity that brings glory to God, draws you closer to His creation, and provides an opportunity to share your faith with fellow riders? Motorcycle and Jesus enthusiast Tim Riter has some amazing stories and spiritual truths he's collected from riding over 200,000 miles, covering 46 states and 3 countries. In our conversation with him, we're going to discover what happens when a long-haired hippie biker strolls into a redneck bar, or a new back tire causes a dangerous spill, or a chance encounter with an angry driver turns into a 20-mile chase, and a whole lot more. These and other engaging devotions will show you how your faith blends into your riding and help you experience that same sense of adventure you get from motorcycling in your walk with God, or in this case, your ride with God. Who's our next guest? A follower of Jesus is central, but he did leave him for some time back in the college days to explore other faiths. He's written 10 books, been a pastor, rappelled off of a 190-foot bridge with 100 feet of rope, and ridden over 200,000 miles on motorcycles through 44 states. He has 2 master's degrees in ministry and another in communication. He's convinced that Jesus is the way to life, and the Bible is his owner's manual for our lives. Sounds unconventional? That's intentional. Please welcome the author of God, A Motorcycle, and the Open Road, a devotional, Tim Riter. Tim, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric. It's good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Great to meet someone, fellow 50s and 60s devotee who watched our country transform before our very eyes into, you and I represent a generation of new thinkers, a new world. My Eastern European family came to this new world, and you have certainly embraced it, going from pastoring to having authored so many books about the Lord. Your Tim Riter, Riter.com website is, let's say it's unconventional, because that's exactly your message, is that you can be unconventional yet be radically sold out for the Lord. So take us back to the early days of your faith. I think part of your journey was born out of the Jesus movement, and part of it was born out of a search and looking for some answers. So take us back to the early years of your faith being formed and those who influenced it.
Eric, I grew up in church. Mom was a neat Christian lady, and I had a sincere faith, but it was pretty shallow. Before my senior year in high school, up at a camp, they did 635 verses of Just As I Am, to either accept Christ or to give your life to full-time Christian service, the ministry. Had a camp romance with a girl named Rosie. She was going to be a missionary to Africa. So I thought, well, if I decide to be a missionary to Africa, I might get an extra goodnight kiss. The shallowness of that faith, even though I went to a Christian college, evaporated within the first year. There are questions that we have to deal with and make our own. And that sparked about 3 to 4 years of searching, wondering. I looked at other world religions and belief systems. And then in about a 3-month period, God brought 3 different things together to a culmination. I tried hard to change the selfishness of my life. I'd seen a Marcus Welby TV show of a young kid. He was blind, got an operation to see, and then all of a sudden, all he cared about was himself. I got really angry at him. Then I realized he was me. And I sat down in the middle of grad school, knelt at the side of my bed, and said, God, I think you're real. All the evidence points that way. I've tried to change this and can't. You've got complete freedom to do whatever you need to make me a better person. And then with all the arrogance of a 23-year-old, I said to God, if this works, I'm with you forever. If it doesn't, I'm gone forever. Eric, the cool thing, within a week, several people had said, Tim, what's happened? You're different. And that was probably as much proof of anything, not just that I sensed it within, which I did, but others who had no idea what was going on had seen a change. So that was really what got me back into God. Being involved with the Jesus movement was a key thing. Went to a lot of the concerts that Calvary Chapel did in the tent. Did some research for my master's thesis on that. Led a Christian coffee house for a while. Passed out tracts at the Rose Parade. And I think from that, that's what gave that unconventional. I was a pretty straight kid until that point. I realized that when you walk with God, there's a freedom. There's an ability to go beyond tradition in order to follow God a little bit more purely. And that's been kind of the theme ever since.
You know, listening to your story, faith has to become our own. And I think that God delights when we kind of throw down with Him, and He does some of His best work when we really square off the same way that Jacob wrestled with God. I mean, this was the birth of a nation, a new name, dedicated to wrestling with God, to being in this, to not letting go, and that's really what you're saying. That if you're real, I'm going to grab a hold of you, and I'm never going to let go. But if you're not real, then I have nothing to hold on to. And everybody has to come to that crossroads. I think that people who are born in church and raised in church and think they're a Christian because they attend don't really recognize, and many denominations don't really have an invitation. I require it when I'm invited to speak anywhere, that I don't care what your denominational doctrine or tradition is. I don't care whether you give me an honorarium, but I do require an invitation at the end. And I've had some startling results. Had a music minister of 47 years, and his mother was she was the organist and music minister for 30 years prior to that in the same church. And he answered the call 47 years. And as he walked down the aisle, the gasp and the shock, and he got up there to shake my hand, and he said, nobody's ever asked me that question before. Nobody's ever asked me that question before.
That's sad.
It is sad. It's a sad commentary on what we're doing, and you know, we're in that crossroads today where people aren't being asked. People aren't really embracing the fullness of this gospel message. You've embraced it in a unique way. And it's been unconventional. Look at you, look at me. You know, I went into corporate America with a ponytail that was hidden in a three-piece suit. And I refused to cut my hair, but I found a way to pull it back and tuck it in and buy shirts with the collar, which was 2 inches bigger than my normal neck size. And I would pull it back, and my hair was nice and neat, and you could never tell, and it was nicely shaved at the side, but you could never tell, but I wasn't willing to give it up. And I've had facial hair since I was able to grow facial hair, and have not shaved my beard in maybe almost 60 years, 50-something years, 50 years. That's unconventional. You know, that's part of our identity. But God uses the unconventional all through the Bible. He uses the unconventional. You've grabbed a hold of a concept of motorcycle riding, which for you represents freedom and of adventure. This is what faith represents, but you found a way to combine the two in a rather unique way. What brought both of those two things together?
They occurred pretty close to the same time. That it was in February of '71 they came back to God, but in the let's see, it would have been the summer of 1969. A neighbor of ours, a Jewish guy named Hal, he had a Honda Trail 90 for his kids, and he'd trucked it out to this place, a big open field where they could ride. He was over at our house, and he said, "I've got to go pick up the kids. You want to go along?" It was a boring Sunday afternoon, so I went along. And he said, "Why don't you take it out for a little spin?" The little bitty Trail 90. I said, "No, I don't need to." And he kept pushing and pushing and pushing, kind of with the fervor of a Jewish mom. And finally, just to shut Hal up, I jumped on the bike. And it was nice. Wood in my face, the freedom was kind of cool, but it didn't really grab me. And then at the end of that year, in finals week, we're tired of studying, and we thought, well, let's go out and see a movie. A bunch of the guys at college. And someone, I don't know who it was, picked Easy Rider. And my roommate then and I were planning to go to Canada. A previous roommate from college moved up to Kamloops. And this is our chance, our graduation present. But I got in an accident in my car, didn't total it, but I didn't feel good about it. And Mark ran out of money. And then came Easy Rider. At this point, I was not yet a Christian. And it captivated me, that freedom of the open road, being out in creation, or I would have called it then nature. I still probably thought God did exist. I wasn't sure, certainly not relational. And so I worked a little bit, bought a Honda 350 Scrambler, which was way too small, the wrong type of bike, and went to Canada for a month. And it absolutely caught me. It was the being out in the middle of the world, not insulated in a steel box, what I often called a steel coffin, even though it's safer to have that. But you experience all that's out there. 4 months after that was when I came back to God. And that trip played a key role. I saw the majesty of God's creation. I saw what a tremendous being it had to be to create something like this by merely speaking. So ever since then, it's actually totaled about 240,000 miles on bikes. It's up to 46 states now. And I may get the last 4 in this year, Lord willing, to have 50 states on 2 wheels.
Wow. You see a great connection to the freedom, the adventure, the connection with what God's created through motorcycle riding. There are many motorcycle riders out there, not all who are following the Lord. I think that the impression that there's 2 camps. Those that think that everybody who rides a Harley that has long hair and a beard is a Hell's Angel, and they're working for the devil. Then there's those that as they pass you by and you think you're about to lose your life because 20 guys on a motorcycle are coming up behind you, and you quickly pull over, and as they drive by, there's a cross on the back of their leather jackets, and they're riding for Riders for Christ or for whatever the name is. And I've never had the opportunity to really have a conversation with one of those that rides with a group and evangelizes. And they evangelize in truck stops, and they evangelize in diners and in campgrounds and at concerts and at various gatherings at Coachella and at many different gatherings. And that's their way of connecting and ministering like Paul did, being all things to all people. And so for them, they go into the place where bikers go, and knowing that there are places where drugs and the sex trade are predominant, and because they share the common love of a Harley, of an Indian, of whatever it is that they have a love for, that they have, somehow it levels the playing field and opens up the door to an invitation. Has that been your experience, that it's much easier for a person on a Harley to talk to another person on a Harley?
I would extend beyond that, Eric. I think when you're riding, especially on cross-country tours, that people will talk to you that have never talked if you're in a car. I've met people at a Howard Johnson's in Massachusetts, and they found out I was just going to see America, and they asked me into their home and said, use our house as a place to stay for as long as you want, explore it. And the next morning, I was this long-haired hippie biker on a chopped Honda with an American flag painted on it like Easy Rider. And the next morning, he leaves his wife and 5-year-old kid alone with this long-haired hippie guy. It gives you phenomenal opportunities to talk to people. And in addition, bikers talk to bikers in a way you get it. A good friend of mine lives in Huron, South Dakota, and a friend of his has a ministry to the outlaw bikers at the Sturgis rally each year. It's hundreds of thousands of people that descend upon Sturgis. They take the town over in a good sense. And there's one campground where all the outlaw bikers go. And this ministry goes out and provides a free breakfast for them every day in order to start conversations. And it'd be nice to say that all went down the local river and got dunked. Not all do, but our job is not results. It's to let them know. It's between them and God, the decision. I love that passage in Ezekiel. It said, we are watchmen. And if we see the enemy coming and we don't warn them, we're responsible. If we warn them and they respond, then everything's cool. But we bear responsibility to get the word out. And the cool thing with biking, there's an instant connection to fellow bikers. And I've had conversations with outlaw bikers, with people that are on big tricked out Honda Goldwings that are with a trailer behind. There's a whole range, but there's something that unites all bikers. It's one of the stories in the book, God, a Motorcycle Open Road, is about going through the hills just above Sturgis. I was going really tight in the corner, and a guy came on a bike the opposite direction. And so bikers wave at each other out in the open road. And I knew I was going pretty quick. That would change my balance. He waved, and do I wave or not? And I did. It's that wave that's shared of a love of two wheels that unites bikers. It allows you to have some phenomenal connections. And I think if I could extend that, we need to find a commonality with all people so that we can, again, talk to them, give them the opportunity to hear more about God.
Well, I think that anything we do, as we opened up with Romans 14:23, so whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God, that Romans 8:28, all things. And when God says all things, He's including motorcycles, He's including non-motorcycle riders, but He's also including motorcycle riders, and you've written this great devotional. We're talking with Tim Riter, author of God, a Motorcycle and the Open Road, a Biker's Devotional, that contains a multitude of stories and examples of God's glory and how circumstances can be used for good, for His glory, and that the open road can be a great opportunity to share the gospel. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to dig into more of God, the motorcycle, and the open road with Tim Riter. We'll be right back. Not everything that makes the headlines has biblical importance, but many events that happen around the world do, and you never hear about them. Igniting a Nation is pleased to teach Revealing Prophecy every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. at the Marriott 280 in Birmingham. We will cover worldwide events and insider information that will connect the dots of what's happening around the world with biblical prophecy. If you happen to miss a class, we'll televise each week's class at 10 o'clock Central Time on ignitinganationcom and all our social media outlets. Copies of the teachings will also be available to purchase on our website at www.ignitinganationcom. The Lord meets you right where you are, and so does Igniting a Nation's new live streaming outlets. You can now watch Revealing the Truth, Revealing the Bible, and Prophecy Revealed simulcast live each Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 1 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on YouTube Live, Facebook Live, Vimeo, Periscope, and through our website, www.ignitinganation.com. No matter what device you are using, our program will automatically scale so you won't have to miss a single program. And if you happen to miss an episode, you can always subscribe to the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel and access over 1,000 interviews and never miss your favorite authors, special guests, and topics that interest you the most.
There are lots of ways to see Israel, but nothing compares to seeing the land of the book and the people of the book through the eyes of two Jewish believers who can take you on a journey that will bring the entire Bible to life. When you join Rabbi Eric Walker and his #1 rated tour guide, Canaan in Israel, you'll experience incredible teachings, first-class accommodations, and actually walk where Jesus walked. You will experience the Bible transforming from black and white into living color, and you will never see the Bible in the same way again. For more information, visit us at www.ignitinganationcom/events.
The Lord contends with what contends with you, and Igniting a Nation is committed to bringing to light each and every issue that faces a believer's life. Our live stream programming and teachings take you on a journey to finding biblical truth from a wide variety of experts who share their insights into a deeper walk with the Lord. We have assembled the most comprehensive panel of experts in the fields of prophecy, caregiving, healing from trauma, shame, and abuse, and so much more. We continue to expand our teachings and programming to meet your needs. We're committed to healing the nations with biblical truth. Visit www.ignitinganationcom to develop a deeper walk with the Lord and start your journey to a transformed life. The Bible commands us to study to show ourselves approved, but most study using Bible study tools and not actually studying the Bible chapter and verse. Igniting a Nation is pleased to present Revealing the Bible, recorded and taught each week before a live audience. We take you deeper into the actual Bible and verse in both Hebrew and English and connect the dots between the Old and New Testament. You can attend our 2 classes in Tuscaloosa and Birmingham, or watch the program every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time on ignitinganation.com and all our other simulcast outlets. For more information, visit www.ignitinganationcom/events. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heart lines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Tim Riter, author of God, A Motorcycle, and the Open Road. You tell a number of stories. Kind of give me an idea. You've written other books, and your other books were different than this. You've written a number of nonfiction as well, I believe. Did you write fiction?
No, I've never done fiction.
Okay.
It's predominantly Christian living nonfiction, the standard book, about 50,000 words. And I never wanted to do devotions. I thought they're sappy, they're short, they're surface, they're shallow, and they're so sweet, you almost get spiritual diabetes. Mm-hmm. But I was talking to my agent, and I thought, I've got a lot of stories from writing. And we put together a concept of, would have about 1,000-word chapters, have 50 of them. It would open with about 350 words of a story, and then about 2 pages or another 650 words of what does it mean in following God? How does this lesson apply to our lives? So it's kind of a new genre for me, and really in devotional writing. There are other books about the same length, but they'll have 3 chapters or 3 pages roughly in a devotion, but it's 99% story and a little hook. I think today in the world, people are crying out for content. They want some meaning, they want significance. Harvard University just did a study about the level of faith is increasing in the church today. There are fewer people that call themselves followers of God, but at the same time, the ones that are there are growing in their depth. And I think people are starting to want significance, that the theologically liberal churches they're losing membership in droves. The theologically conservative churches are growing because they're giving something of meat and substance. So I wanted to give, in devotional format, something of substance, an enticing story that everybody, even if they're not a biker, could identify with. Turns out most of the books that I've sold personally so far have been people who don't ride, who are giving it to their friends who might be believers. A lot of them aren't. And these books are getting out to people that ride motorcycles that don't know God as gifts. And there's a story to entice them. So this style is a bit of a departure, kind of making a whole series concept. This one's with Harvest House. I've got 10 other books on this adventure devotion series called Lamborghini Lessons. Driving Faster, Following Stronger is one. Even have one, I shouldn't probably mention this, but let's see, what's the name of it? That Divine Brew, Drafting Spiritual Lessons from Beer. Got about one right now with Don Otis, a proposal on high country, finding God in the high places. So there's a lot of ideas coming up, a lot of stories, and hopefully fresh will get people to see God has substance to him.
Tim, the reality is that unless we have a practical faith, how we can draw upon our faith in everyday life, then it's not an everyday faith. It's an at will or on call or on demand kind of, when you want to sit down and watch something on Netflix, it's on demand. That's what our relationship is like with God, is we have a problem and we want God on demand. So we turn God on and then we have our conversation with them. And then when we're done with the conversation, we turn God off and he's no longer with us. He's just on demand. But in this whole concept that you've introduced and the stories you tell is about a God who is always there, always present, and always talking. And the question is can you see him in the circumstance? Can you see the lesson and what you just went through? And in every situation that you talk about in here, they're very practical, they're very real. A tire blowing out or a new tire, one of your riding experiences. But life occurs in the valley, not on the mountaintop. And the people that tell you that life is it's a mountaintop to mountaintop, it's glory to glory, that this is your best life now. You know what? If this is my best life now, then heaven, this can't possibly be my best life now. The life to come is what our hope is. The 1 Peter 3:15 kind of answer for our hope isn't that this is as good as it's going to get. It's no, this is as bad as it's going to get. This is the only hell that I will ever know and that you will ever know. And for some, it's the only heaven that they will ever know. And that's why you and I do what we do, so that we take them into an understanding. So in this devotional, it is advice and counsel and wisdom, nuggets of wisdom in various circumstances. Let's take an example that comes to mind and kind of walk us through one of them where we might get a little glimpse of what one of these looks like.
Probably one of the scariest times in the entire trip. I was in the Rhode Island state capital. They've got the charter from the King of England back in the day, the first colony with true religious freedom. And I just missed the last thing of the day, the last tour. I mentioned, to the guy at the door, I'm a school teacher, a bachelor's degree in history, and I really love to see. He said, well, tell you what, wait till this tour's over, and I'll take you back and give you a private tour. He took me back, they'd already started to put it away, and right next to where they kept it was a teletype machine where the news would come over. As I was looking at it, the teletype chattered. This was in 1974 at the height of Watergate. And I was on a 3-month trip really to find America, to see where God fits into the country. Well, does the system work, this marvelous experiment in democracy? And the word was Nixon had called Ford back to Washington, D.C. He scheduled a speech that night and was going to resign. I was a California guy. I'd known a lot of the shenanigans which he'd done here back in the 1940s. Not that I was born then. My dad told me about it. And so I'm driving a little bit further down the coast. I get to Groton, Connecticut. And the speech was like for 7 o'clock at night. I thought, well, I can either go to a bar and see a TV or go to a hotel. been teaching the last 2 years at a Christian school, junior high, that paid almost nothing. So the cheapest was a bar for the price of a beer. Down to this place, the Grotto. You'd walk in, and there's a wall in front and a hallway. You go either to the right or the left. So I go to the right, and I come around the door, and it's this dark, low bar, a redneck bar, the kind a long-haired hippie biker would not want to stay in very long. So I go back around the corner, and just then, somebody from the other side came in. And I'm thinking, just a coincidence. So I moved to my left, and exactly then he moved to his right. And I moved to my right to get his way, and he moved to his left to stay in front of me. And I'm thinking, I'm going to get snuffed here. That this guy looked kind of big. I didn't realize I had a big jacket on. It was kind of chilly. It was dark. And I moved again, and the guy followed me, and I thought, I better make amends. So I said, hey, I don't mean anything by it. Held my hands up. And this guy, it wasn't the hallway. It was a mirror. I have scared myself in my own reflection. And I realized so many of the things in life, the fears we have come from ourselves. There's no objective reality, and we don't realize that God is with us in all things. Not that only good things happen to Christians. I mean, we get bad stuff. Jesus promised that. In this world, you will have trouble. But he's with us. He gets us through it. And most of the fears we have are small. All the fears we have are smaller than God. And sometimes we need to say, God, I trust you. You'll get me through it one way or the other. I don't have to live in fear.
You know, it's interesting that we tend to look at motorcycles as being dangerous or more prone to accidents, but the truth is statistically that's probably not the case. You know, I'm sure that you've had to have these conversations many times about the safety of bike riding, and there's a safe way to ride and there's an unsafe way to ride, and people make same way with flying a private plane. There are safe ways to fly and there's non-safe ways to fly. But there's lessons just in the basics, just in your maintenance, just in how you take care of your motorcycle, which is your flying on the wings of angels, if you will, the way you circumnavigate the country. How do you see God working in you through the practical? You know, people are looking for the sensational when really we don't serve. I mean, God is of course sensational, but God's supernatural, and God uses the things of the natural to reveal supernatural truths. I would think that in the motorcycle riding world that you would probably see that closer up than many of us see it.
There's a verse in Romans 14:23 that has kind of driven my life ever since I really got that. Of anything not done from faith is sin. And what I want people in the book to see is that our life is a tapestry. And a lot of the threads in the tapestry are never seen, but they're all important. They all are needed. In the same way as we craft a tapestry of our lives, both on the bike, on our jobs and the family and connections with the neighbors, we need to see God in it, and then make the actions we do as an intentional expression of the faith we have. I think that's probably the most practical lesson I have for people. You know, there are a lot of other things with new bikers that I pass on the advice I got when I began. Look on every car on the road is out to get you intentionally. And I think for all of us in life, we need to realize there's danger and be wise and be smart. No, we can't minimize it, but look for the role that God has. How can God get us through it? And how can we bring glory to him? I think that's probably the most important. Can we express the grace and the truth of Jesus, which are two, sometimes we think they're opposite, but they're key parts of Jesus' nature. We need to show both of those. There's a hard edge to truth, and then there's a soft edge of grace.
You know, you've done both individual rides and group rides. There are different lessons which you've learned in group dynamics, but there's also unique lessons that you've learned in solo rides. How do you see both of those, and how do you talk about those encounters in the book?
One of the benefits of solo rides is the inherent freedom of a motorcycle. The inherent freedom of the open road is maximized on a solo. One of the trips I took was at 3 months in all. We spent 1 month in a mission project in New Mexico, and then I took off for 2 months on my own in search of America. That's where I was at Rhode Island and Groton, Connecticut. I hit 31 states and 13,000 miles in the next 2 months. And the nice thing, I had no destination except go and explore. I would see an interesting side road and I would take it. When you're alone, you can do that. I love museums. I love history. The group I ride with every year in a big trip, these guys are riders. They're not museumaholics. So if I'm on a solo trip, I hit every museum and every historical spot I can find. With these guys, we find great roads to ride through, but you've got the companionship. You've got more people. One time we were up in Weed, California, and my key broke off in the gas tank, and it was locked. Couldn't do anything. And the two of the guys with me, we shuttled back and forth to an Ace Hardware place, probably 5 or 6 trips. The guys were able to pull the broken key out of the lock, and we found a locksmith, and he would say, okay, try this. And one of the guys would ride back 3-4 miles to where the bike was, try it. It wasn't quite there. 4 or 5 trips at least. If they hadn't have been there, I'd have been stuck. I would have had to have my wife overnight email me a key. But there's the companionship. If you get hurt on one of them, well, it's that same trip later from Weed. We're going from Weed over to Eureka, California, the coast, and Brad hit a deer. If that would have happened to me alone, I would have died. Brad, he tumbled, the deer came across, he hit the hindquarters. His bike went in one direction, the deer another, and Brad went in another. I could see him flopping. We got to him. He was almost not conscious. It turned out he had punctured a lung, broken some ribs, broke a scapula, a collarbone, and a lung had collapsed. And what happens when I talk to a nurse after is that when the both lungs with air, they keep a balance. But if one gets collapsed, the other lung with air starts pushing the heart over, and it can kill you. Because we were there, we were able to call and get help. They had to airlift Brad out. If that would happen to me on a solo ride, I would have died. So and I think there are things in our faith that sometimes we do a solo thing. It's on us. This is what God calls us to do. And other times we go alone, involved with people. We need both.
Is there a scripture, a prayer, something that you have found that is kind of your go-to when you launch out on a trip, something that you use as a foundational prayer, you dedicate it, you request divine appointments? How do you set this up with the Lord in partnership, inviting Him to go on these trips with you?
2 things. The first, and this is not going to be what you'd anticipated probably, before every trip, I pull out a CD and play loudly Steppenwolf's Born to be Wild. Get your motor running, head on the highway, looking for adventure and whatever comes our way. And it's the quintessential bike thing. The other verse is one that a fellow pastor, author friend gave me. It's from Psalm 45 in the Message. Ride majestically, ride triumphantly. Ride on the side of truth, ride for the righteous meek. And we need to make it a spiritual, and what I want to do with God is to make it a spiritual adventure. One of the nice things about riding, and until the current bike I've got, I've never had a bike with music or any kind of sound stuff. And I used it to pray. That now I just bought a Goldwing. It's got CD, CB, 6-changer CD. It's loaded. I don't know if I'm going to use it in the trips or not, because one of the things I most enjoy is connecting with God and spending that time. We pray more on the bike because it's dangerous, but we also pray we've got the solitude, and we're in the midst of his country, and we see his handiwork, and we can't help but worship at that time.
You talk in the book about a time when you think angels helped you out and you had an angelic encounter. And Paul makes it pretty clear. He says, be careful how you treat everybody with kindness, for you might be entertaining an angel, which means that, the possibility exists in our everyday life that we're going to have divine encounters that we are completely unaware of. But you seem to have an awareness in this situation. What was that like?
I was up in Banff, Canada. I was coming south. I had a passenger in the back, we were camping, and I had a duffel bag on top of the luggage rack. So we had a very high center of gravity. I bought that 350 Honda probably a month before. So I had roughly a month and a half of riding. So I was pretty much a newbie. I wasn't going 90 miles an hour in a 55 zone, but I was pretty close to it. And I came around this one corner, big sweeping turn to the right, and it said, I'll use the miles rather than kilometers, like 35 miles an hour. And I'm doing 60. And I had a really nice line. I'm just carving the turn like you do with skiing, and it was safe. But then the chain slipped off, and it locked the rear wheel totally. And also, I'm riding like this, and it's stopping me. All the laws of physics that I know, I should have gone off to the left. I didn't know enough to counter that. I'm here, I'm trying to keep the bike upright. I'm convinced this day, Eric, that there was an angel or maybe a whole squadron that kept the bike upright. That it was far beyond my ability to keep the bike up. Finally skidded to a stop, pulled off the side of the road, took about 2 hours to fix the bike, got it running. Part of it, and you'd kind of alluded to that earlier, it was my fault. I had not kept the chain lubed and stretched. You've got to adjust a chain every day on a long trip like that. And I was enjoying the bike so much, I didn't maintain it like I should. We need to maintain our lives, our bodies, and maintain the temptation level and keep a lid on it, that otherwise it's going to bite us in the fanny sometime. But it was, to this day, I'm convinced that was angels. In fact, there's a book, that story is in, it's coming up pretty soon, When God Happens, Part 2. It's a collection of stories where angels appear, and this story is in that book also. Angela Hunt and Bill Myers are the ones that put the book together.
Sure, we know Angela very well. Your book is filled with events, some which frightened you, some which were unusual. What was the most unusual town, place that you found along the way, and why did it stick in your memory even to this day?
I think the most unusual town is historic, it's unique, New Orleans. That I pulled in New Orleans, after a long rain. There's a bridge that comes in from the east, like probably 10 miles. A rainstorm hit, and I'm getting drenched. Find a motel for the night, and I asked a place, where can I eat? And the guy at the desk recommended this place that had flounder stuffed with crab. It just melted my mouth. It was delicious. And then I took a cruise down Bourbon Street, and I had never dreamed of the decadence that could take place in American City today. There'd be topless ladies on a swing from a 2-story building coming out into the open. Guys were handing out flyers of all the joys involved inside. And I'm kind of keeping my eyes straight as best I can. And then I came across, hit a couple of jazz clubs. Al Hurt popped in there. It was delightful. And then I saw this little street corner ministry. This guy had gone to Tulane University, got involved in all this stuff. And this was in 1974 when this part was just beginning. And he really thought he should be a woman. So he started going through the hormone treatment. He developed breasts. Had not got to the point of taking off his male equipment, but it was pretty close. And then God, in some very cool ways, brought him to him. And he is now a minister, an evangelist on the Bourbon Street. He left the body as it was. He said, I want people to see the way I was before I became the person I am now. And right in the midst of all the decadence of Bourbon Street, here's this guy right in between gender-wise, but he's wanting to tell people about how God can transform and provide a better life than they have. So the town, unbelievably decadent, but some really cool Christian servants there.
Well, I have had similar experiences in New Orleans and know of its decadence. I know that at 2 o'clock in the morning, over all the noise going on below my hotel room on Bourbon Street, I could hear a voice, and it was Amazing Grace. And so I got up at 2 o'clock in the morning and began to walk to try to find where it was coming from. It was a blind black man sitting on a bench in the park singing Amazing Grace, and it just seemed to just hover over all the evil, over all the darkness, over all the noise I was able to hear. And I went and found him, and I put a $100 bill into his hand, and he thanked me and he blessed me, and I left, and all night long he sat there and blind, sitting on the sand. Apparently he did that every single night. He would go out there as soon as it was nighttime, and he would stay there all night singing Amazing Grace, right, as the counter to that. And I think that was my angel encounter. I truly believe that this was, to hear over all the noise of Bourbon Street, the song Amazing Grace, over just all of that, riding right on top of it, right, as if it was the ceiling, that all the sin could only hit this ceiling and couldn't make it into the heavenlies. And so it was really quite extraordinary. But unfortunately, my good friend, we've run out of time. We've been talking with Tim Riter, author of God, a Motorcycle, and the Open Road, a Biker's Devotional. You can find, if you want a signed copy of this, they can get it from you on your website at Tim Riter, RITER.com, and encourage you to take a look at his website, where you will find unconventional is the theme, unconventional thoughts, unconventional approaches to show you a new way to look at the same God. Okay? God changes not, but our view and our understanding of him changes ongoing, all the time, transformational, and the stories will captivate you. And a great gift for a friend that rides, or even if you are just interested in some great stories, you've passed that guy on the road and say, well, you know, it's my secret dream, it's my secret desire, but I'm just too conservative, or my wife would never let me do that. Well, you can take the journey as if you were on the back seat right along with Tim through the pages of this book. Tim Riter, thank you so much for your time and for being with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Eric, thank you very much. I've enjoyed this, my friend.
Thank
and may
you.
God bless you richly.
Thank you, and you as well. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.